After my miscarriage, I went looking for support and I found people who cared, genuinely, deeply cared. But caring wasn't the same as being equipped. What I was living wasn't just grief, it was neurological, it was physiological. It was my body learning to fear the very thing I wanted most. And nothing in the support that I found was built for that. So I spent years building something that was. Today, I want to talk about the gap I found, the one that still exists in this space, and why the distinction between caring and being truly equipped matters more than most of us want to admit. If you're in this work or called to it, this one's for you.
Welcome to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. I am your host, Sharna Southern. I am an angel mum, a rainbow mum, a pregnancy loss practitioner, and trauma-informed coach. I created the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss out of my own experience with loss in the hopes to provide understanding and healing, educating people on pregnancy loss, and creating more women or men in trained support roles. In this podcast, I hope to shed light on what I wish I knew in relation to pregnancy loss, opening up the conversation, breaking the stigma, and bringing real life stories plus guest experts. Thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back. I am really glad you are here for this one, because today I want to talk about something that I think about a lot. Every day, to be honest. Something I see happening in this space, and something I believe we need to talk about openly. If you have been in the reproductive loss space for any amount of time, whether you're a practitioner, a healthcare professional, or someone who has lived through loss and felt called to do something with that experience, this episode is for you. I want to talk about the standard that reproductive loss care actually requires, and why right now that standard is not being met. Not because the people in this space don't care, they do. But caring is not the same as being equipped. And that distinction is what this episode is about. Are you ready to dive in? Okay, good. Something is happening in the reproductive loss space right now. More women are stepping forward. More lived experience is entering professional settings. More people are raising their hand and saying, I have been through this. I want to help other women through it too. And that is powerful. That matters. That is exactly the kind of momentum this field needs. But there is a tension inside that momentum. And I think it's time we named it. Because pregnancy loss is not just grief. It's physiological trauma. It's neurological disruption. It is identity fracture. It is a nervous system that may spend months, sometimes years, trying to protect a woman from something it has learned to fear, including the very thing she desires most. And holding that properly, safely, ethically requires more than empathy. It requires a framework. And that is what we are talking about today. I want to start with what I'm seeing in this space, because I think if you are honest with yourself, you are seeing it too. General grief models being applied to reproductive trauma, as if they are the same thing, as if the framework built for bereavement built for loss that arrives from outside, can simply be transferred to an experience that is neurologically, biologically, and physiologically distinct. Support groups being held without trauma sequencing, without containment structures, without the tools to safely open and close what gets activated in the room. Practitioners sitting across from bereaved mothers with good hearts, genuine care, and real commitment, but without the framework to meet what is actually happening in that woman's body. And the nervous system component, almost entirely absent from existing training. The postpartum experience of a bereaved mother, her body that prepared completely for a baby that didn't come home, is unaddressed. The fertility implications of unprocessed reproductive trauma, again, is unaddressed. The biological reality of what loss does to a woman's hormones, her nervous system, her capacity to conceive again, unaddressed. This is the gap, and it is not a small one. I want to walk you through something because I think the clearest way to show you why general grief support keeps falling short is to show you what is actually happening in the body and the brain of a bereaved mother. This is the neurological thread. And once you understand it, you will never be able to unsee it. So stay with me here. When a woman experiences pregnancy loss, her amygdala makes an association. The amygdala is her brain's threat detection center, and it does what it is designed to do. It learned from the threat. Pregnancy equals danger. Sound the alarm. That is not a metaphor. That is fear conditioning. The same neurological process that protects us from genuine threat, now activated by the very thing she wants most. So when she enters a subsequent pregnancy or even considers trying again, her amygdala does not distinguish between this pregnancy and the last one. It recognizes the trigger and it fires the alarm. The hypervigilance before any appointment, the inability to bond, the bracing, the terror that arrives alongside the hope. That is not anxiety disorder. That is not psychological weakness. That is the brain doing precisely what it was designed to do after threat. And here's where it gets more complex. When the amygdala fires at full alarm, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. The part of the brain that's responsible for rational thought, emotional regulation, decision making, the capacity to be present, it stood down in favor of survival. She cannot think her way through it in that moment because the thinking brain has been sounded out, which means the practitioner who responds to that moment with reassurance, with reframing, with cognitive tools, is working with the wrong part of the brain entirely. Now add oxytocin into this. When cortisol is elevated, which it is when the survival response is active, oxytocin is suppressed. The body cannot simultaneously mobilize for survival and open for connection. These are opposite neurological states. So the woman who cannot bond with her subsequent pregnancy who holds herself at a distance, who feels numb, who cannot let herself love this baby fully yet, she is not failing as a mother. She is in a cortisol dominant nervous system state that has neurologically closed the door to bonding. But here is the layer that makes reproductive loss uniquely complex. For many women, oxytocin itself becomes a danger signal. Because oxytocin was present at the moment of their loss, it surged during labor, during birth, during the moments of connection, or even just through the pregnancy itself. And then the baby was gone. The nervous system made an association. The feeling of bonding, of opening, of love became linked to the most devastating experience of her life. So now, when she starts to feel that pull of connection toward a new pregnancy, toward a new baby, the amygdala recognizes that neurological signature and fires the alarm. Because last time she felt this, everything fell apart. Bonding itself became a threat cue. And underneath all of this, the hypothalamus is receiving one clear message. This body is not in a safe environment to reproduce. The hypothalamus regulates the hormonal cascade that makes conception possible. And when the nervous system has been in prolonged cortisol dominance, when reproduction has been associated with devastation, the hypothalamus downregulates fertility. It suppresses the hormones required for ovulation and implantation, not because something is wrong with her body, because her body is trying to keep her safe. So let me say the full thread out loud. Pregnancy loss occurs. The amygdala marks pregnancy as dangerous. The alarm fires at subsequent triggers. The prefrontal cortex goes offline. Cortisol dominates. Oxytocin is suppressed. Bonding becomes neurologically unavailable. And for many women, the feeling of bonding itself becomes a threat cue. The hypothalamus receives the message that reproduction is unsafe. Reproductive hormones are downregulated. Fertility is suppressed as protection. That is the neurological and physiological cascade of unprocessed reproductive trauma. From the moment of loss to the woman who cannot conceive again, it is one unbroken thread. And not one part of that thread, not one, is addressed by general grief training. This is not about blame. It is not about professional. It is about professional maturity. The field is growing, and growing fields require standards. Now, I want to talk about a misconception, one that I understand completely because I held it myself. The misconception is this: that lived experience qualifies you to hold this work professionally. And I want to be really careful here because lived experience matters enormously. It gives you depth, it gives you empathy, it gives you the ability to sit in the room with a bereaved mother without flinching, without needing her to be okay before you can be okay. That is not nothing. That is the foundation, but it is not the framework. And I know this because I lived the gap between the two. After my own miscarriage, I knew I needed to become the support I never had. So I started studying. I completed a life coaching certification. And every research assignment I wrote was about pregnancy loss, about the support that was missing. I surveyed women directly. I asked them, if specialized support existed, would you seek it out? The answer was yes, unequivocally. But the life coaching framework wasn't enough. So I added trauma. I became a certified trauma informed coach, and I brought that lens into the work. And still, there was more that bereaved mothers were carrying that nothing in my training was reaching. Neurologically, somatically, hormonally. So I began studying neuroscience. Every layer I added revealed another gap. Not because the training I did was wrong, but because none of it was built specifically for reproductive loss. And that is the point. Not life coaching, not trauma coaching, not neuroscience studied in isolation. Each one gave me a piece. None of them gave me the thread. I had to build the thread myself. And that is what this certification is. Passion is not a framework. And in a space this vulnerable, the distinction matters. So I want to talk to you about responsibility, because if you're going to step into reproductive loss work, you're stepping into one of the most vulnerable spaces in a woman's life. Think about what she's carrying when she walks into a session. A nervous system still in survival mode, a body that has been through physiological trauma, an identity that has been ruptured, a desire to try again that is simultaneously the thing her body has learned to fear. She's not just grieving, she is navigating one of the most complex neurological and physiological experiences a human body can move through. And the practitioner sitting across from her needs to understand that, not just hold space for it, understand it. Because the long-term nature of reproductive trauma means this is not acute grief support. This is nervous system work, identity work, fertility work, relational work that requires sequencing, work that requires knowing how to open a session and how to close it without leaving a woman's nervous system activated and uncontained. Work that requires knowing when something is beyond your scope and who to refer to. And that is something I want to speak directly to as well, because one of the things I am most proud of inside certification is the professional network it builds around you. The practitioners who come through this program have access not just to the framework, not just to me, but to a community of specialists in the intersecting fields. Women like Valerie Rubin, who is an anxious attachment and preverbal trauma specialist. Alyssa Chavez, a functional nutritionist and reproductive loss. Judy Thompson, supporting women navigating childlessness not by choice. Alexia Leachman, who speaks about tocophobia and reproductive anxiety disorder. These are not just guest speakers. They are practitioners you can refer to. When something arises in your work that moves beyond your scope, you know exactly who to call. That is what proper professional formation looks like. You are not just trained, you are supported. And that protects your clients and it protects you. So let me tell you about the certification, the Pregnancy Loss and Trauma Informed Specialist Certification. I created it because there was no structured specialist pathway for this work. Not one that addressed the neuroscience, not one that covered the nervous system. not one that took the full complexity of what bereaved mothers are actually carrying biologically, neurologically, and somatically, and built a framework around it. So I built it. It is built on the pregnancy loss recovery method. 6 pillars, trauma informed, neuroscience backed, built from the ground up for reproductive loss, not adapted from general grief theory. It covers emotional literacy, identity reconnection, neuroscience and interoceptive foundations, nervous system optimization, neuro reprogramming, and trauma informed processing. Every pillar sequenced deliberately because sequencing matters. You cannot do identity work before nervous system work. You cannot do neuro reprogramming before the foundation is laid. The architecture of this certification mirrors the architecture of recovery. I built it out of my own healing experience, and I like to call it the transitions of healing in real time. And students move through it guided, not alone. This is not a course you purchase and move through in your own time without support. And if that is what you're looking for, it is not this course. This is professional formation, the development of the practitioner and the leader that this field actually needs. This is not about creating more practitioners. It's about raising the standard. I want to be clear about who this certification is for, because it is not for everyone. And I say that with complete respect. The certification is for women who are already decided. The practitioner who is already in this space, formally or informally, whether you're aspiring or existing. And who knows that what she currently has is not the full picture. Who has sat across from a bereaved mother and felt the gap between what she had and what the woman needed. Who refuses to continue working in the margins of her own capability when the woman she serves deserves more. It is for the woman who is already supporting lost mothers informally, in her clinical role, in her community, in the DMs, and who is ready to formalize that into a methodology the field can actually use. It is for the woman who takes the responsibility of this work seriously enough to be properly equipped for it. It is not for the women who are still in acute grief themselves. It is not for women who are exploring whether this might be their lane. It is not for women who are not ready yet to commit to the standard this field requires. No apology for that clarity. It is kindness, not gatekeeping. This certification is for women who have already decided and who is ready to walk it properly. Reproductive loss care is evolving. The women entering this field right now, the ones who are taking training seriously, who are building frameworks instead of just holding space, who are raising their hand and saying, I want to meet this standard. Those women will shape what this field becomes. And I want to say something directly to the woman who has been listening to this episode and recognizing herself in it. You already know this is your work. You already know that what you currently have is not the full picture. You already know that the woman you are here to serve deserves more than good intentions and lived experience. The neurological thread I walked you through today, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the oxytocin, the hypothalamus, that is not the ceiling of what this certification teaches. That is the foundation. The question is not whether you care deeply enough about this work. I already know you do. The question is whether you are prepared to lead it properly. The April cohort of the Pregnancy Loss and Trauma Informed Specialist Certification opens Monday, the 6th of April. It's only for 5 women, and that is intentional. If you are ready for specialist formation, details are in the show notes. It is through application only. So my Instagram will be there to DM me to apply or even just to inquire about the certification. I look forward to seeing you there.